welcome everyone. Welcome, one and all to Impolite Company on the www.gcpr.live network, where we defy the old adage, the one where you're not supposed to talk about religion and politics in polite company. Well, that has not served the church or the nation very well, given especially the state of affairs right now. So we talk about religion and politics, and we do it in a healthy way. I'm your host, Matthew Best, here to walk with you in honest dialogue and showcase the power of seeing humanity in people with different perspectives. So you can send questions, comments, and whatnot to contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. You can listen to previous episodes, and you can find those on. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on podcast channels like iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just search for Impolite Company, and you can dive further into the topics that we talk about on the show on my blog, which is pastormatthewbest.com. If you enjoy what we're doing here and you want to support the show, you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com/Impolite Company. Really appreciate any support. We turn it right around and put it back into the show. And before we dive into today's episode, I want to take just a moment of some special privilege, personal privilege, talk about some things that I care about. One is you can show some love for Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the heart of Allison Hill, one of the most economically challenged sections of Harrisburg and Pennsylvania. It's the church that I'm called to serve. Christ Lutheran Church is a special place and a community of healing. It's what makes this church so special is that we host 3 free health clinics that since 2018, we've had over 100,000 visits. And so you can go to christharrisburg.org. And if you want to donate, then you can go to /donate. If you care about homelessness, there's the Memorial Blanket Project. Each year, people make blankets from all over the place. We had folks make blankets from Australia this past year. We go to one location, make an art display, highlight homelessness, and at the end of the night, we give all those away. Done it in a variety of places up and down the East Coast. And so you can go to memorialblanket.org. And lastly, if you're looking for a tool to help you with a difficult conversation around gun violence, there's a book called American Roulette. I'm the one who came up with the idea, and there are 10 authors actually. Follows the life of 8 characters over the course of a day until the event. Doesn't offer solutions; it just highlights humanity, something that I think is sorely missing in the conversation around gun violence. Again, the name of the book is American Roulette. All the money from all the proceeds of the book go to organizations that address gun violence. So anyway, that's all the great stuff. Got that in. Today, I am really pleased to have as my guest the Reverend Kayla Keilholtz, who is with me today. She is a pastor of Ebenezer Lutheran Church in Marion, Virginia, 15 minutes from the town that she grew up in. And she's passionate about God's radical love for all people and moving the church forward to be a place of radical welcome. And additionally, know Kayla from seminary. We both went to seminary together and got to know each other from classes and going to different places and whatnot. So welcome, Kayla. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about vision, and when we get to this a little bit, we'll say why Kayla, but she answered the call. Is really what it comes down to. And so we're going to get into that. The biggest thing about vision is this isn't just some special people have vision, right? I mean, I like to say everybody has vision. It's a muscle that people aren't used to using. But how would you define vision, Kayla?
For me, really, vision is a dream or hope for the world around us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's almost kind of putting it into, when I think about vision, I think of a visual, right? It's almost making it tangible that people can see it, they can touch it, they can smell it, right? All of the senses go into the idea of a vision. because if you can't do that, then it's not really a vision.
Yeah.
I I pulled up some scripture because being a good pastor, we should probably do that, right? I pulled up some passages about vision. There's several, and I won't lie that AI helped me out with this a little bit. Searching for that's one of the great ways that you can utilize it, right? Searching for where does Scripture talk about vision. So I want to share some of these, maybe get kind of your take on some of it, right? So Psalm 37 is one of the first places that comes up. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart, which is kind of, it's not using the word vision,
Mhm.
but vision is about fulfilling God's desire for the church. That's another different take on this, and feel free to just jump in at any time. Don't worry about it. The second one is comes in Philippians 3, and this is where Paul uh, gives a compelling vision in Philippians, right? You got Proverbs 29. This is probably the most famous passage of scripture about vision. Where there is no vision, people perish.
Mhm.
Right? I'm sure you've heard that one
Yeah.
before. Right?
Yeah. I really love that one.
Yeah.
Um, and really what comes to mind, like as soon as you read it, and thinking about vision and my definition of hope and dream along with it, I think about an actual program that's in our town.
Oh yeah.
It's
Okay.
called Creating Connection.
Okay.
Um, and it's a peer recovery group, started by someone who specializes in peer recovery,
Mm-hmm.
um, because we have a lot of addiction
Okay.
in our area, and so very few resources. And so they meet every single Tuesday and do something creative,
Mm.
where everyone in the community is invited to partake, but it's especially for those who are trying to get sober.
Okay.
Um, and it all started because the woman who had this vision of a
Mm.
place where people could connect and find community beyond the community of addiction, um,
Wow.
and find a way to fit back into the broader community,
Yeah.
while also finding ways to help and heal themselves creatively.
That's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
that's a beautiful example. When you're talking about that, I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm thinking about a couple of other folks that I've heard. I don't know if you're familiar with David Brooks, who's a columnist for the New York Times.
Okay.
Um, he's an interesting guy who has a very interesting background. And I just watched a video. He gave a speech in England about how the Ivy Leagues kind of created the problem that we have. He's
Mm,
coming from an Ivy League background too,
mhm.
and he's on a more traditional conservative, not MAGA
Yeah.
arc, right? So, I mean, he's been kind of consistent in that he's not a Trump guy or anything like that. And one of the things that caught me was he said, I'm not really big on the social justice movement, but I appreciate that they're trying to create a better society and there's a sense of community. He said, I don't agree with MAGA, but I appreciate that there's a sense of community in that.
Mm,
And so like I hear that, and what you're talking about
yeah.
is there's this desire for community, which really kind of gets into this idea of vision isn't just about me personally or you personally. It's about something much bigger and broader
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
that.
Which makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
from the very conception of humanity, we were created to be communal beings.
Right.
And so all of this brings us about to wanting to be in community.
Yeah.
Um, and I really appreciate him saying that, while he doesn't agree,
Sure.
MAGA is building a community, which it's something very difficult, but
Sure.
also I think important for me to hear, because I see the MAGA movement as community destroying, Whereas
Hmm.
for them, it really is community building,
Sure.
and understanding that additional struggle for people who are within that community.
Right, right. I mean, it's a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
right? There's a shared values. There's right, all regardless of how it plays out. There's at least
Yeah.
the kind of the core of what why people are attracted to or may be attracted to it, right? And then you can get into all the complexities around that
Right.
as well. But at the core, there's a sense of belonging
Yeah.
with people that see the world in a similar way,
Yeah.
that type of thing, right? I'll read a couple more
Yeah.
scripture here. So Joel 2, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. Right. That comes out at the Pentecost reading with Peter. That type of thing. Boy, talk about lots of vision in that, in
Yeah.
a variety, which also extends the idea of vision is comes in a variety of forms as well. There's Habakkuk, one that we just absolutely will go to regularly, right?
That's right. That's right.
I've never heard anyone said, "Oh, my favorite book of the Bible is Habakkuk." But anyway, I'm sure somebody has. Anyway, this is from Habakkuk 2, which is write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that he may run who reads it. I've actually heard that before. Of course, I'm pulling out these out of context as well.
Right. Yeah.
So Psalm 119 has a prayer for renewed vision, and of course, probably the most famous vision in the New Testament. Well, there's probably multiple. Of course, Jesus presents a vision every time. I think Jesus talks about the kingdom of God or the
Mhm.
kingdom of heaven. He's laying out a vision
Yeah.
of what that is. And then, of course, you have Revelation, which is an apocalyptic vision, which I know a lot of people get scared of Revelation and all this. And I'm like, I don't know. The story is really about God wins.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's the
I always
summary.
find it so fascinating. I don't really find it scary. I
Yeah.
find it very fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
I love reading Revelation because of it has this vision and it's very creative. It reminds me of like what a this is back 2000 years ago. This is essentially what they would have done with an epic Hollywood blockbuster movie, is what just got painted
Yeah.
by John. He writes it out and I'm like, oh wow, because you can see what he's talking about, because he even says this is a vision that's been given to him.
Right. Yeah.
Isaiah talks about oftentimes visions that have been given. Daniel, book of Daniel, has visions, right? All these type of things. So it's a very common scriptural motif that goes on there. So I'm wondering, do you have, and the answer could be, I don't know. Do you have any other passages of scripture that come to your mind about vision that kind of that you latch onto?
Not in specific. But when I was, thinking about vision after you reached out,
Mm-hmm.
what came to mind was Dan Erlander's Manna and Mercy.
Okay.
And it is a book that can be used, really, it's for like middle schoolers, could be
Oh,
used for
okay.
elementary schoolers, but middle schoolers, early high school. Um, and you can use it for confirmation or Sunday school, and it takes you through the whole Bible.
Oh, wow.
But one of my favorite parts is at the very beginning, um, when he talks about the Israelites in the desert, and he
Mm-hmm.
describes manna society,
Okay.
um, which for people listening, if you don't really can remember about manna, is that when the Israelites are in the desert, God provides the Israelites with manna and quail.
Mm-hmm.
So manna literally meaning what is it? It's described
Right.
as a flaky substance, and they gather it up in the mornings to have throughout the day. Um, and then before the Sabbath, they have enough for then the Sabbath day. But they're only supposed to take what they will use
Yeah.
and what is enough for them. If they take more than their share, then they wake up the next day and it's rotten and maggoty and gross. And that's really what I love about the vision of man of society is everyone having enough.
Mm,
Nobody having too little, nobody having too much,
yeah.
but enough to be sustained and enough to be cared for.
Yeah.
I think especially in today's world and right now, sometimes we view enough as just getting by.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's really not what man of society was supposed to do. It was supposed to be enough to sustain you
Yep.
and help you get through, but also to be able to enjoy the Sabbath.
Right.
Whereas now families work themselves to the bone in order to just get by.
Right. Yeah. That's a key difference, right?
Yeah.
That enoughness.
Yeah.
This is getting into the idea of shalom,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is, I'm a big believer in the idea of shalom, uh, and I always am saying, it's more than just a greeting,
Yes.
right? And it means more than just peace, as far as a greeting of peace. Shalom is this completeness and wholeness. Or enoughness. I've used that
Yeah.
term
Yeah.
as well, right? Exactly what you're talking about. Of it's not barely enough. It's enough that it's satisfying,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And if you have enough that it's satisfying, you don't need more,
Yeah.
right? And this is where we get into problems. Are We're not satisfied, either individually or as a
Mhm.
society or a community or whatever the case may be, and so we think we got to add more,
Yeah.
and then we're not in shalom anymore.
Yeah.
Shalom has this balance, where there's enough to be satisfied, but if we feel like we need to add more, then we're above it, or if we feel like we're just surviving, we're below it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not.
Mhm.
I mean, this is throughout Scripture.
Yeah.
You've got all the whole notion of shalom, over and
Well,
over again,
and that's
right?
through the years of Jubilee,
Right.
where
Right.
you're able to divide land and give back land so that everybody has enough and
Right.
are satisfied and enough to sustain them.
Right. And you see that in Acts 2,
Yeah.
where the whole community held everything together, and there's enough.
Yeah.
There's enough for everybody.
Mhm.
I know some people get really kind of like, oh, that's this thing of, like, no, first of all, it's not, because none of these isms ever existed before.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's not communism. It's not this, that, or the other thing, because that didn't exist until, when was it, in the 1800s or something?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, this was just, hey, we care about our community, and we want to make sure there's enough,
Yeah.
which is shalom, which is what, for me, I always argue, this is what Jesus was talking about when he's talking about the kingdom of God,
Yeah.
is shalom. You want to experience, which has to do with right relationship and all those type of things.
Mhm.
So, and of course, vision, it can be for a variety of things, right? It can be for the church. It can be for a nation, a community, a congregation, an organization. It can be for a street, for a family, whatever the case may be, a business, all that type of stuff, right? So the idea for the show, and especially having you come on, Kayla, came because you responded to a post that I did. I had put it on Facebook. I'd written a blog post, which is, what are we waiting for? And it was essentially this call to say, hey, what are we waiting for? Why are we waiting for someone in Washington, D.C., or our state capitals, or some public figure to come up with some vision and lay it on us, as if we are incapable of presenting a vision? And what are we waiting for? And so then I just put it out there of like, well, so what's your vision? And you responded back. Would you like me to read what you responded?
Sure.
Is that all
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Because I read it, and I was just so moved by it, because I was like, yes, this is, how beautiful is this? And so that's where this went. So I'm going to go ahead and just read this, and then we can talk a little bit more about this. So this is what you wrote. I want a world where my best friend isn't followed in a store because of her skin color, where my sister can live comfortably as someone who is single without sacrificing safety, where my LGBTQIA plus friends are enthusiastically encouraged to live into who they are, where my soulmate doesn't have to fight against insurance companies while trying to help her patients, where mental health and physical health aren't only for the people who can monetarily afford it, where children aren't worried about ICE separating them from their families, where women aren't told that they, quote, asked for it or deserved it, or just didn't say no loud enough, where an amazing teenager in my life and my never boring little cousin aren't told that they are a, quote, dire threat to the American people and our way of life because of their autism, where creation isn't viewed as a commodity to be exploited, but a gift to cherish, where AI doesn't steal from flesh and blood human beings full of creativity and passion, where billionaires don't exist, where families don't struggle to get by, where local farmers aren't one bad season or disaster away from losing it all, where everyone has a warm home and full bellies, where empathy isn't viewed as weakness but strength, where a Nazi salute is viewed with the horror that it should be, where being a leader means looking out for those who can't offer you anything in return instead of only those who can owe you something, where women have total autonomy over their bodies, where guns aren't loved more than children, where white supremacy is viewed as the disease it is, where my call isn't questioned by mediocre men who read the Bible through twice and decide now that they're a pastor, where the idea of church doesn't cause a feeling of anxiety, but instead warm welcome. I want a better, kinder, equitable world. It's beautiful. It's
Thank you.
absolutely beautiful. And this is exactly what I was talking about, is this idea of we all have a vision in us. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that everyone's going to jump on board with everything. But my gosh, I'm reading this and I'm like, yeah, I can get on board with all that. My
Yeah.
gosh. Right? I
Well,
mean,
and all of those things came out of conversations that I have had with all those people.
yeah.
Um, I think after it was right after I got off the phone with my sister, who her rent has gone up again, and she's trying to figure out housing where she is single, she lives alone, and in the place that she is in now, it's very safe. It's a little gated apartment community.
Yeah.
She lives high up on the floor, so very safe, very secure. But she's having to look at other places that aren't as safe and secure simply
Mm.
because she has one income.
Yeah.
And so I right after I got off the phone, I saw your blog post. And so that
Yeah.
was really fresh in my mind. And
Uh-huh.
it got me thinking just about all the other conversations that I have with people throughout just days and weeks.
Yeah.
Um, my one friend, I refer to her as my swole mate because we met at
Uh-huh.
the gym.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
she is an endocrinologist,
Okay.
and we have conversations weekly about how she has to fight insurance for her patients.
Mm.
And and she even puts in her notes when insurance doesn't follow through with a claim that like they aren't doing their job. This
Yeah.
is cruel and they need to do better.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
All the ways that the world and people in power try to step on people who need help and who
Right.
aren't don't fit their perfect, I guess, ideal of what they think the world should be.
Yeah, a lot of that is reminding me. This came from another blog post that I did. I talked about the idea of there's two ways to I forgot exactly how I worded it, but essentially, if you're going to compare yourself to others,
Mhm.
right, you can either lift people up to where you are or even beyond, right? So you're kind of pulling people, especially who are struggling, lifting them up, that type of
Mhm.
thing. Or you can bring people down so that you can feel higher,
Yeah.
right? And the problem with that is, well, there's lots of problems with it, but uh,
One of
uh,
them.
is you actually haven't improved at all.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
tore someone else down so that you could feel like you're superior or
Mhm.
above or be what you, because your situation has literally hasn't changed by dragging somebody else down. It kind of reminded me of I remember in high school the swimming classes, right? And that you if somebody is like flailing around, they're just going to latch on to anybody and they will take them down with them.
Yeah.
That's what seems to be going on. And it's just this, I don't know, like in some ways I struggle with this because I'm like, how is this actually improving not only society in general,
Mhm.
but how is this actually improving the people who think they're benefiting
Yeah.
from this,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think we see a lot more of this with the
Yeah,
rise in social media.
yeah,
Um, and it's so interesting because I know the times that I have let my worst self
yeah,
like be the one that wins. I feel terrible after.
sure,
So I can't imagine how hard someone's life must be
yeah,
or what they're missing in their life that this is what makes them feel better. Or
yeah.
and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it makes them feel worse, but feeling worse with another person, misery loves company.
There you
Maybe
go,
that's
right?
better than trying to lift someone up and lift themselves up.
Well, that kind of gets me into the notion of there's a lot of pain in the world,
Yes.
right? We all have pain in some way, shape, or form. It's just a matter of how much and what it looks like and all this, right? I mean, right now I think about I this is just seems so very prevalent in the sense of if you look at the numbers around, especially like teen suicide rates, and the same thing with veterans. I mean, people who have gone through stuff.
Mhm.
Those numbers have been, which the contrast of people going through suffering to the point that is the relief from the pain and
Yeah.
suffering, because that's really what's going on, right? That there is no other pain relief besides ending one's life. Think about how much pain somebody really has to be in for that, versus the fact that, oh my gosh, we're supposedly the wealthiest society in human history, and we're supposedly so wonderful and all this type of other stuff, and yet we have this contrast of serious mental health issues that are untreated, that there's stereotypes and stigma around them, that we don't even want to talk, we're not even willing to talk about
Yeah.
things like gun violence because, well, we can't do anything about it. Well, since when could we not do something
Right.
about something?
Yeah.
Because I see all of a sudden like, oh, we can pass a law about whatever, because it's a supposedly a problem, but now with this we can't, like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just,
Guns are beyond that. That's yeah.
right. And I get that, guns are more than just guns, they're identity for folks.
Mhm.
um but again, I think this gets into the whole, when we have this dichotomy of either all the way over on one end or all the way over on the other end, we lose out on the where's the, I hate the word common sense because I don't think it exists. But I really don't, because if common sense existed, I think the world would look far different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's fair. That's fair.
right. So yeah. Anyway, I'm wondering what your thoughts are. I want to bring hope into the
Mhm.
conversation because I think vision and hope are related. They're not the same thing, but I think they're related to each other. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about how are those related? Maybe how would you define hope, and how would it be different than vision?
Mhm. Um, it's so funny. I always struggle to define hope.
Yeah.
Um, because I think it's such a feeling word,
Mm.
at least for me, is that I struggle to actively define it. Um, Aside from just the idea of things will work out, like
Mm,
God will work things around for God's glory, God will
yeah.
work things around for God's good.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you have to have hope to
Yeah.
have vision,
Yeah.
um, or at least to be able to push your vision forward.
Yeah.
Because you can have an idea about something, like going back to creating connections. The woman who did it, Crystal, she could have had an idea for something, but no hope to move it forward, and it would have just died.
Yeah.
Whereas she had hope for a community, for a better world, for a better community, a safer community, a more loving community, and push that vision forward.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to have hope in order to push a vision, or have, or even allow yourself to think of a vision, to
Yeah.
explore a better world.
Hmm.
um because without that, I don't think you can even dream up a better world if you lack all hope, because there isn't anything then.
Yeah. I there's a colleague here in the Synod who has defined hope as, and I kind of have my own spin, but I took it off of the my colleague. Um, he said essentially, hope sees the reality for what it is,
Hmm.
right? Doesn't sugarcoat the reality. So
Mhm.
it's not wishful thinking or positive, the power of positive thinking or anything like that, right? It sees the reality of cruelty and
Mhm.
degradation and oppression and all that type of stuff. And it is saying God is taking us on this other path and inviting us on this path, and it's gonna happen. So right, that's so you get this
Yeah, yeah,
combination
yeah,
of hope. Is the reason why we need hope is because there is this current, and it's really kind of switching the notion of what's the alternative.
yeah,
Hope is God's path, which is not the alternative. What we're experiencing is the alternative. And
yeah,
it's kind of bringing us back to, well, this is what God has been up to all along, right? And because God has given us free will, we often jump off the path,
yeah,
and go
yeah.
down. We think, ooh, because we're not fully engaged in shalom, right? Oh, we need more, or we need less, or we need whatever. That's
Mhm.
that's the alternative.
Yeah,
And God is like, oh, wait, back over here, Matthew, back over here, Kayla, and
yeah,
and this community or nation or whatever hey, oh, this is where we're going.
yeah,
That's just a dead end over here.
yeah,
Like that's the reality, is that is a dead end. It does
yeah.
not end well. And so let's get back on track over here.
I really like that definition.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And
That
it
was a
reminds
jumble
me,
of words, but
yeah, but the initial,
right. Yeah,
definition,
yeah.
yeah, I really like that. And it reminds me of the poem, Hope is a Sewer Rat.
Oh,
And it is basically a response to Emily Dickinson's Hope is a Thing of with Feathers.
okay.
And it's a humorous but really great poem, because it says that, hope isn't something that's delicate. It is
Mm,
scrappy, it has
yeah.
teeth, it's seen things, and it
Oh,
lives on.
yeah. Yeah.
um and if you're gonna look it up, be aware, people who are listening, there is some like not great, like questionable language, but
That's all
it's
part of hope, though.
right, right. Yeah, it's great. I love it. I think it's fantastic. But I do like that scrappy idea of hope,
Yeah.
of just like dragging yourself from the gutter.
Uh-huh.
Hope still lives on.
Yeah, I even get a visual of like Jesus, there's the image of Jesus like pulling, I don't know if you've seen that, where Jesus is pulling like Peter out of the water, right? Because
Yes.
that's like a
Yeah.
hopeful scene. It's like, oh, hey, by the way, you're drowning.
Yeah. Yes.
That's real. That's because you took your eyes off of me. Here, let me pull you up, and this
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
direction we're going. Because if I don't, it's not going to end well for you, Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really neat. I like that. I wrote that down. Hope is a sewer rat.
Yeah. I can't
Wow.
remember the author.
That's all right.
But yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
That's pretty cool. So, all right, I want to shift to a little bit to let's take this idea of hope and vision and all the things that we've talking about in Shalom, and let's start applying it to a little bit of things, right?
Okay.
You gave a vision kind of as the people in your life,
Mhm.
right? All the different things that you presented because of conversations you have, which was absolutely beautiful. And I think part of that is really kind of important because it's not an abstract,
Yeah.
right? It's no, this is about real people. This is
Yeah.
about, you got names of folks, and this is about their life and how you're connected to their life and how they're connected, whether they realize it or not, as
Mhm.
well. So I want to take this into vision for the church because, we do talk about religion and politics, and and again, the reality is there's a lot of decline in the church.
Yes.
And and we're not just talking about the LCA, but in 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 the northern hemisphere and in Western Christianity, let's be really specific about that because Christianity is growing in the southern hemisphere like crazy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they launch like I forgot like 10 churches every year in Tanzania or something like that.
Wow.
I remember our bishop went to Tanzania. We have a companion synod in Tanzania. Went there, met with the bishop there, and the bishop was like, "Hey, we've had ten new church launches in the last year. How many have you had?" Right? And we're laughing because like he's like, "Yeah, we haven't had a church launch in 25 years or
Yeah.
whatever it's been. It's been a long time. That's the most recent
Yeah.
church launch." um and we still can say, oh, that's the new one. It's like that's
Yes.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
generation ago. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And cultures are different and where things are different and all this. So sometimes what we measure is was useful in the
Mhm.
past, maybe it's not as helpful anymore. Or what else should we be measuring? Oftentimes the church measures butts in the seats and money in the plate and then stops. And
Yeah.
those are okay things to measure. There's nothing wrong with measuring those things, but oftentimes they're lagging indicators.
Yeah.
And there are other things that we should probably be measuring that are leading indicators, right?
Mhm.
And those type of things. So anyway, I threw a whole lot at you, but I'm wondering about. I want to talk about, and I'm not saying Kayla, you got to have an answer for this. Um, I'm wondering about what do you envision for the church in America? What do you envision? Just play with let's just play
Yeah.
for a little bit.
So I struggle with this because I really try not to focus on numbers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But it's it's difficult because I love the sound and the view of a full church.
uh-huh,
Like there
sure,
is nothing better than a full church.
sure,
Um, and just hearing all the voices combined singing and worshiping God.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's
and so
energy
I
off of that, right?
right, yes, yes, there's that energy, and I think that I want the day of full churches back
Sure,
in a different way, right?
yeah. There you
It
go.
doesn't have to be the perfect family with white picket fence
Right.
and two
2.3
children and a
children.
dog. Right. Yeah. We don't, doesn't have to be that.
Right.
I want the tattooed, alternative, pink haired
Yeah.
lesbian in my church,
Uh-huh.
right? I want the drug addict
Yeah.
to know that they're safe within this church and the homeless person.
Yeah.
Um, and what I think about, and when I think it was last year, year before, whenever it was, I called you for advice. And you said you took this call because you wanted a fuller picture of the
Oh,
children of God.
yep.
And that is what I would love to see across all churches, right?
Yeah.
A full tapestry.
Right.
of the children of God,
Yep.
and not just the monolith
Right.
of a white family.
Yeah.
It's
White suburban middle
right,
class,
white suburban
which
middle class.
which
Yeah.
there is nothing wrong with
No, no, not
right.
at all.
I
Not
don't
at all.
I don't want to cast the stone
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's also me. I mean, like
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
white middle class and I live in essentially suburbia in Carlisle. And
Yeah.
and 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 it's just that's where we are. It works for
Yeah.
us and all this type of stuff. And at the same time, I recognize that that's a sliver. That
Yeah.
is just a sliver of the image of God, that there's so much more richness, right? So getting back
Mhm.
to the idea of shalom, we're not at shalom because we're less than shalom.
Right.
Right. And so I want to get to enoughness. I want to get to
Mhm.
completeness and all and wholeness. That's what I'm was desiring in that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, I really do. I hold on to the idea that justice is central to Lutheranism, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we haven't even talked about justice yet. My
right, yeah,
gosh.
that even more
Right?
stuff. Um, and I'm so grateful and feel very honored to be here at Ebenezer, because Ebenezer is known in town as the church that helps.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, I am so proud
Yeah.
consistently. I am so proud of my people, because we are a small church.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of overhead, or
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But whenever there is a need,
Yeah.
they really, really try to make it, and they
Yeah.
really try to help people. Um, Unfortunately, there is a lot of need, and
Yeah,
so
sure.
it is absolutely heartbreaking when we do have to turn someone away
Sure.
just because we physically cannot afford it.
Yeah.
Um, but they at least know, the people in town at least know they can come to us
Yeah.
and ask for help. And
Yeah.
I have a whole list of people that they can also contact
Yeah.
and other things to try and figure out. Um, but I want, and I've told my congregation this, I love that we're the church that helps.
Yeah.
I also want us to be known as the church that welcomes,
Yeah.
and truly welcomes people as they are,
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastically as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they need to put on a front or a
Right.
face to enter into the doors, but to truly live into who they are, and be able to worship and acknowledge whose they are as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
um it is a big important piece for me whenever I talk about God and community and creation, that I always remind them that when God created us, God called us good too. It
Yeah.
wasn't just the creation around us. God called humanity good as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. This is interesting because you started off with would love to go back to the days of lots of people in the pews,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of you mentioned several things, the singing and all this and the energy, the spirit
Yeah.
of it, all that. And you talked about the reality of look, we're a smaller congregation and we
Mm-hmm.
can help.
Yeah.
I would imagine because you're smaller, you can then be more personable.
Yeah.
You can be more interrelational, all those type of things, right? I I I honestly don't remember when the pews were full. And I'm 49.
Yeah.
But what I try to remember for folks, or what I try to remind people of is, you had lots of things going on, and the culture was different, and it centered the church, the institutional church and all that. And there was stuff that was not so great going on
Yeah.
at the same time. And some of that is because of large institutional type of things, not just because, oh, it's the church, that type of thing.
Right.
You can have some corruption of values and all that type of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's
So
true.
we have to be aware of those type of things. Not that that can't happen in smaller settings as well. I mean, Jesus had 12 close, and
Right.
one of them betrayed him. So like we're also dealing with humanity in this. To me, when I think about like vision for the church, one of the images that comes to my mind is actually when in my previous call we would go over to the truck stop just a couple miles down the road, and we would go in the evenings twice a month, and because we knew that there were people living in the parking lot in their vehicles, and so we would go in. We had this homemade sign just on a, it was probably like 2 foot by 3 foot, and one of our folks like wrote, "Do you need a shower? Do you need a meal?" That type of thing on it, right? A real big investment of real high tech. And then we would be in there, and people would come in. We would do laundry with folks. We would pay for the laundry. The truck stop would pay for showers for folks because cleanliness was a huge issue
Yeah.
for folks. And then we would do a meal with people. We took them over to Denny's. We sat in the back row of Denny's, and this became a regular thing. And it was this beautiful, I call it was the foretaste of the feast to come. This beautiful array of humanity in, you know, people that are just completely messed up, people who are lost, they had mental health issues. I mean, who knows if people were trafficked? What we had truckers who were just, they would just join. People traveling through whatever. I think the most we ever had was probably about 40 folks.
Wow.
And so we would sit kind of like, the Last Supper, but we were on both sides of the table.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember I took a picture, and it was just this beautiful, here's this entire big long table out. And we would do like dinner church with it. And that all started because somebody, we never had it. My intention was never to do that. It was just to be with people and to serve and to hear their stories and get to know them and all this. And then before the meal one time, somebody said, "Hey, can we do a prayer?" And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And they did. And after a month, then we started asking, like, "Do you all want to do some worship?" Like, it doesn't have to be anything formal. And everybody said yes. And so like I took the liturgy and I kind of pared it down to so it would fit. And it was this beautiful gathering of humanity doing worship in a Denny's, not caring that other people would hear us and all this type of stuff. And it created this beautiful interaction. We had this regular waitress who specifically picked when we were going to be there so that she could be our waitress. And
That's beautiful.
I remember the one time because so I would always ask for a piece of bread from the back, and then some grape juice in a coffee cup. That was my chalice, and I would always ask, like, "Hey, can somebody help me with distribution of communion?" And one time she said, "Well, I'll do it." And I said, "Great." And she said, "What do I do? I don't know." I said, "Really simple. Here's the instructions." Well, she had these questions. I said, "Just look, you're a server. You know what to do.
That's right.
Like, offer people here, here's what you say. And this is what we do." And it was this, and she was just so moved because she was not a church person, but yet here
Yeah.
she was participating in this beautiful church service in this setting. In like, I just think, I'm like, this is where Jesus would be,
Yeah.
hanging out with these folks. And here we are. We had some church folks who were there, of course. We had folks who lived in some of the motels nearby who had heard about it and would come over because it was this sense of community. And this was this vision of everybody has enough. There's
Mhm.
this enoughness and this wholeness and caring about each other. We would do, during the prayers of intercession, we would just go around and everybody could say what they wanted to offer up. And so then people would kind of give their updates of, "Oh, we found a place to live," or "We got a job," or on the worst end of, like, "I got this diagnosis," or like really heartfelt stuff. So there was this sense of vulnerability with folks. So when I think about that and I hear what you had said, like there were a lot of people
Yeah.
and it was full and we had that vibe and all that. And there was this powerful sense of belonging, that sense of community that we've been talking about throughout this. So I just wanted to share that because it
That is
kind of,
beautiful.
yeah, oh my gosh, it was absolutely amazing. Loved going, and at the same time, there's the struggle of, we would say goodbye at the end of the night. Those folks are going and sleeping in their car,
Yeah.
and I'm driving home, and gonna sleep in a bed. And
Yeah.
oof, there are times that it really hit me, because like worship is going on and it's powerful and you feel the spirit, and then you're back in the world
Yeah.
and the struggle of like, why am I going to a home when these people are going to go sleep out in their car?
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, we're getting close to the end here. This is like, it just flies,
It
right?
does. It really does.
So let's talk a little bit about justice in
Okay.
this. We're not going to give justice enough justice,
That's right.
but we've got about 8 minutes or so. How do you feel that justice fits into vision?
I think that most visions that I see people trying to push forward or live into have to do with justice, whether it be justice for themselves if they're a part of a marginalized community, justice for another person. Um, I think of there's a woman in my congregation, her and her husband both work in humanitarian aid. Um, and they have been talking consistently about how harmful the cuts for
Mm,
USAID have been,
yeah,
and really encouraging people to, call our representatives, make donations to all these nonprofits and things, um, because they want justice for the people who are experiencing hardship and pain,
yeah,
um, and especially people who are like in Ukraine or in Palestine. They aren't experiencing justice where they are,
yeah.
and so they're trying to help them experience justice through someone else, or through the love and help of someone else.
So how, maybe this would be helpful too, because I hear what you're saying. And how would you define justice? Because that, I think
Yeah.
oftentimes this is one of those terms like freedom
Yeah.
where everybody's using the same term, but oftentimes people aren't speaking the same language. And I think justice is one of those terms that sometimes I think there are people who end up thinking this is a partisan term,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not. It's a God term.
Yeah.
It's literally in scripture.
Yeah.
God came up with it first.
Right.
So how would you define justice?
I was going to say equity, but that's another.
Yeah, right. Define equity.
See,
Well,
right.
so I have an idea of
Yeah.
justice is, it's related to righteousness,
Yeah.
right? So righteousness is right relationship between you and I. Well, actually, between God and the self.
Yeah.
Justice is right relationship on an equal plane.
Yeah.
So with
I
the
like
rest
that.
of
Yeah.
of other human beings, even with the rest of creation, right? Because we're all created. So
Yeah.
is right relationship among the created, whereas righteousness is right relationship with between the creator and the created.
Yeah.
That's how
I
I
like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. And that makes it more personal as well,
yeah.
and than the idea of like, because it's become a partisan issue of social justice, it's not
Yeah.
just something out there.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
literally between people in community, whether that community is a community that they're in or community of child of God.
Right. right. I mean, this again brings to me, it always comes back to shalom,
Yeah.
right? Right relationship is there's enough.
Yeah.
There's enough vulnerability, but there's not too much.
Yeah.
There's the law provides protection and freedom, right? It's
Yeah.
this kind of balance, and it's not just for some, it's for all,
Wrong. Yeah.
in that, right? And it treats people equally, and regardless of their station in life, that type of thing. So the law would apply equally across, because that's what a right relationship would be,
Yeah.
not because somebody has more wealth, or not, and this goes back to what you had written in your vision of where billionaires don't exist, right?
Yeah.
The people themselves exist, but not that the hoarding of
Right. Right.
so
Exactly.
much wealth,
Exactly.
that type of thing. um it would be unnecessary, because it's out of shalom,
Yes.
it's out of
Yeah.
sync with shalom in that, right? Yeah, so that's how I think about justice. It has to do with that relational aspect, and I think you're right. There's a whole lot of folks that when they're casting a vision, it does end up having to do with these, everything that you had said in what you presented as a vision has to do with, it's all relational in here.
Yeah.
I mean, every single one of these was relational, um, which is just this. That's, I think, where the beauty is,
Hmm.
right? You mentioned it's not this abstract idea, out there somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes it starts from within us,
Hmm.
and then so that's the relationship we have with ourselves as well. If we can be in right relationship, then we can be in right relationship with others
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
That's true.
So we're coming to a close. Kayla, I appreciate you coming on. Do you have any last thoughts for like a minute and a half or anything like that you want to share about vision or hope or justice or anything like that?
Um, I was thinking specifically when it comes to politics,
Yeah.
and faith. There was this wonderful quote by another pastor. Um, Let me see if I can find it real quick because I took a picture of it. Um, but we get a lot of flack for being too political.
Mm,
Um, when we bring up really things that don't end up being all that political, but are very more God oriented. But it was Pastor Micah Kearney,
okay.
and they wrote, "Our faith is political because Jesus has expectations of how we treat and live with people. And politics, at its simplest form, is how we organize the way we live together in communities."
Hmm.
Um, and I really love that. And I think that goes along so much with what we've been talking about of vision and community and justice and all these things together. Because we don't have any of those things without each other and leaning on each other in communities.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the hope that keeps us going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And that's going to be the last word. So I appreciate it very much having you come on, Kayla. Thanks so much for responding to the post that I had. I was really hopeful that somebody would respond. And I did I got more than just your response and whatnot. But I do appreciate you laying out your vision. And I know it's not like, oh, this is a full and it's got it right. That's not
Right.
also
Yeah.
what vision is, but you presented a vision of really this kind of hopeful, justice oriented, not, make sure we get all the words that we used. And so thank you so much for coming on, for sharing this time, sharing your vision and your hopefulness. So thanks.
You.